December 22nd, 1944. 11:30 in the morning. Bastogne, Belgium. The air was frigid, visible as a frozen mist. Lieutenant Colonel Harry Card observed 4 officers of the German army advancing through the snow. Their white banner was a stark contrast against the war-torn landscape. They carried a message destined to resonate through history, an ultimatum demanding capitulation, cloaked in the confident mockery of assured triumph. The fortunes of war were shifting. This time, the United States forces in and around Bastogne found themselves cornered by formidable German armored divisions. A single avenue remained to rescue the encircled American soldiers from utter devastation, an honorable surrender of the beleaguered town. The German officers awaited, radiating supreme confidence. They had every justification for their optimism. 18,000 Americans were trapped, encircled by an estimated 30,000 German soldiers and hundreds of tanks. No provisions could reach them. The inclement weather had grounded all Allied aircraft. The nearest Allied relief forces were more than 100 miles away. Unbeknownst to them, 130 miles to the south, General George S. Patton had just uttered a promise so audacious that even Eisenhower found it almost unbelievable. A commitment requiring the movement of an entire army through insurmountable winter conditions at a speed previously unrecorded in military endeavors. The calculus of warfare was on the cusp of being redefined, not by superior numbers or advanced weaponry, but by the clash of German overconfidence against American resolve, and by the sheer boldness of a general who refused to acknowledge the word impossible. The transformation had commenced 6 days prior, amidst the pre-dawn gloom of December 16, 1944. Precisely at 5:30 in the morning, the Ardennes forest erupted with a ferocity unseen on the Western Front since 1940. 1,600 German artillery pieces unleashed a synchronized barrage along an 80-mile front, their projectiles shrieking through the frigid atmosphere towards unsuspecting American positions. Among them was Private First Class Robert Leakey of the 99th Infantry Division, who would later pen in his journal, "The very ground beneath us trembled. Trees disintegrated into fragments. The air itself seemed to cry out. We had been assured the Germans were finished. We had been misled." This was Operation Wacht am Rhein, Hitler's final desperate bid to alter the war's trajectory. In absolute secrecy, the Wehrmacht had amassed 410,000 troops, 1,400 tanks and assault guns, and 2,600 artillery pieces. They had maneuvered this colossal force through the dense Eifel forests under the cover of night, maintaining radio silence and utilizing horses to transport supplies to circumvent engine noise. General Major Heinz Kokott, commanding the 26th Volksgrenadier Division, recorded the moments preceding the assault. The soldiers stood in hushed silence within the darkness, their exhalations freezing into visible plumes before their faces. They understood the magnitude of what was at stake. This was not merely another offensive, it represented their final opportunity. The objective was the weakest segment of the Allied defenses, 4 American divisions thinly spread across challenging terrain, many of them new to combat or recovering from prior engagements. The Germans achieved complete tactical surprise. Within hours, entire American units were overwhelmed or in disorganized retreat. However, the German strategy hinged on a single critical element: speed. They needed to secure the crucial road nexus at Bastogne within 48 hours. 7 major roadways converged there, arteries vital for German tanks to reach their ultimate objective, the port of Antwerp, 125 miles distant. Without Bastogne, the entire offensive would falter. Generalleutnant Dieter von Freyberg commanded the 47th Panzer Corps, tasked with the capture of Bastogne. His contingent was formidable. The elite 2nd Panzer Division, boasting 88 tanks and assault guns, the veteran Panzer Lehr Division, with 57 tanks, and the 26th Volksgrenadier Division, comprising 17,000 infantry. Racing towards the same objective from the opposing direction was the 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles. They had been recuperating in Reims, France, following 72 days of combat in Holland when the urgent summons arrived. They were without winter gear and had no time for preparation, simply ordered to seize their weaponry and board the trucks. December 17th, 9 p.m. The temperature had plummeted to 14 degrees Fahrenheit as the initial trucks carrying the 101st Airborne traversed the darkness towards Bastogne. Private Donald Burgett of the 56th Parachute Infantry Regiment vividly recalled the journey. We passed endless convoys of American soldiers heading in the opposite direction, retreating. Some were without weapons. Many lacked helmets. They shouted to us through the darkness, "Go back! Go back! They will kill you all!" One soldier, his eyes wide with terror, grabbed my arm and exclaimed, "There are thousands of them! Tigers, panthers, everything!" I pushed him away. We were not turning back. The convoy stretched for miles, 380 trucks transporting the division through the night. They had no inkling of the ordeal that awaited them. Maps were scarce, and intelligence reports were contradictory. Their sole imperative was to reach Bastogne before the Germans. The 101st Airborne Division possessed an effective strength of 85 officers and 11,035 enlisted men, totaling 11,840. This contingent included 4 infantry regiments, the 5,001st, 5,002nd, and 56th Parachute Infantry Regiments, alongside the 327th Glider Infantry Regiment, augmented by 4 artillery battalions and various support units. The vanguard elements of the 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment arrived in Bastogne at 11:30 p.m. on December 18th, narrowly preceding the main German force by mere hours. Task Force de Sobry, a combat unit from the 10th Armored Division commanded by Major William de Sobry, had already established a defensive position at Noville, 3 miles north of Bastogne. At dawn on December the 19th, they encountered the initial German thrusts. Sergeant William McCloskey, a tank commander with Team O'Donnell, recounted the first engagement. "The fog was so dense you couldn't see 50 yards. Then we heard them, the deep rumble of German armor. When the first Panther emerged from the mist, it resembled a monstrous apparition. Our 75mm rounds ricocheted off its frontal armor as if they were mere ping-pong balls. We had to allow them to approach perilously close to strike them from the flank." The engagement for Noville raged throughout the day. Team O'Donnell, with a mere 15 Sherman tanks, faced the entirety of the 2nd Panzer Division. They held their ground for 48 hours, neutralizing 31 German tanks before receiving orders to retreat. Major de Sobry sustained severe injuries when a German shell struck his command post, but his sacrifice bought invaluable time. December 20th witnessed the arrival of a new commander in Bastogne. Brigadier General Anthony Clement McAuliffe assumed temporary command of the 101st Airborne in the absence of Maxwell Taylor, who was in Washington. McAuliffe, an artillery officer by training, was renowned for his composure under duress, a trait he would desperately need in the ensuing days. The situation map within McAuliffe's headquarters depicted a grim tableau. German forces were converging from 3 directions. The 26th Volksgrenadier Division was infiltrating from the south and east. Panzer Lehr was advancing from the east. Elements of the 2nd Panzer Division posed a threat from the north. By noon on December the 20th, the sole remaining ingress to Bastogne, the highway leading to Neufchâteau, was severed. Captain Richard Winters of Easy Company, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, strategically positioned his men in foxholes along the perimeter. We could hear German tanks maneuvering in the darkness beyond our lines. The men were digging their foxholes deeper, using their helmets and bare hands when their entrenching tools proved inadequate in the frozen earth. The temperature hovered near 0. Men's feet were already developing frostbite, turning black. Within Bastogne, the civilian populace of 3,000 sought refuge in cellars as German artillery systematically commenced the town's destruction. Renée Lamer, a 30-year-old Belgian nurse, toiled tirelessly in the aid station on Rue de la Pépinière, tending to both American and German casualties. She would not survive the siege. The defenders of Bastogne now numbered approximately 18,000 men. The 101st Airborne Division, comprising 11,840 personnel. Combat Command B of the 10th Armored Division, under Colonel William Roberts, with roughly 40 operational tanks and 2,800 men. The 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion, equipped with their M18 Hellcats. The All-African-American 969th Artillery Battalion, and various other artillery and support units. December 21st dawned with visibility reduced to less than 100 yards. A dense fog mingled with the snow, creating a white shroud that rendered movement virtually impossible. The U.S. Army Meteorological Report characterized the conditions as extremely detrimental to any military operations. For the Germans, this weather was a boon, grounding the Allied fighter bombers that had harassed German columns since D-Day. Oberleutnant von Lauer, commanding elements of the 2nd Panzer Division, noted, "The weather is our ally. Without their aircraft, the Americans are merely men like us, and we possess more tanks." However, the weather proved a double-edged sword. German tanks struggled through the mire created by alternating freezing and thawing cycles. Fuel consumption doubled as vehicles battled through the quagmire. Supply trucks jackknifed on icy roadways. Wounded soldiers succumbed to the cold before medical assistance could reach them. Inside Bastogne's perimeter, ammunition reserves dwindled critically. Artillery fire was restricted to 10 rounds per gun per day. Medical supplies were virtually depleted following the capture of the medical company on December 19th. Morphine had to be reserved solely for the most severe injuries. Food rations were reduced to 1 meal daily. Private First Class James Sims of the 101st later recounted, "We were consuming snow for water. My companion in the foxhole had his feet frozen to his boots. When the medic finally cut them off, his toes detached with them. He didn't even cry. He was beyond feeling anything." 130 miles south of Bastogne, in Verdun, a markedly different scene was unfolding on December 19th. In a cold, damp French barracks, heated by a solitary pot-belly stove, Supreme Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower convened an emergency conference of his senior officers. The room was filled with the highest echelons of the Allied command. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, Lieutenant General Omar Bradley, and Lieutenant General George S. Patton. Major General Kenneth Strong, Eisenhower's intelligence chief, had just concluded his briefing on the German breakthrough. The subsequent silence was oppressive. Eisenhower broke it with words that would define the American response. "The present situation is to be regarded as one of opportunity for us and not of disaster. There will be only cheerful faces at this conference table." Patton immediately grinned. "Hell, let's have the guts to let the sons of bitches go all the way to Paris. Then we'll really cut them off and chew them up." Eisenhower's expression turned serious. "George, I need you to attack north. How quickly can you disengage from your current offensive and pivot toward Bastogne?" What Patton stated next stunned every officer in the room. "I can attack with 3 divisions in 48 hours. The room erupted in incredulity. Air Chief Marshal Arthur Tedder actually guffawed. "Moving an entire corps. 90 degrees in winter conditions across 100 miles of icy roads in 48 hours. It's impossible." Eisenhower's face flushed. "Don't be fatuous, George. If you try to go that early, you won't have all 3 divisions ready, and you'll go piecemeal. You'll be destroyed." But Patton was not boasting. For 3 days, his brilliant operations officer, Colonel Oskar Koch, had been warning him about the German buildup in the Ardennes. Patton had already prepared 3 distinct operational plans for precisely this contingency. He had prepositioned fuel dumps, ammunition supplies, and medical units along potential northern routes. "I'm not being fatuous, Ike," Patton replied calmly. "I've already issued preliminary orders. My staff is working on 3 possible axes of advance. All I need is your word." He unfurled a map and indicated the routes to Eisenhower. "I'll use Milliken's 3rd Corps. The 4th Armored will lead, followed by the 26th and 81st Infantry Divisions, We'll strike them from Arlen, driving through to Bastogne." Eisenhower studied the map. The distance was staggering. The weather was abysmal. The roads were sheets of ice, but Bastogne required immediate relief. "When can you start?" "December 22nd morning." "Do it." As Patton departed the meeting, he telephoned his headquarters with a pre-arranged code phrase. "Play ball." Those two words set in motion one of the most remarkable operational maneuvers in military history. Within hours, 133,000 vehicles began their northward movement. The entire Third Army, comprising 250,000 men, had to be reoriented. Supply depots positioned for an offensive into Germany had to be relocated. 20,000 miles of telephone wire required reinstallation. Artillery positions calculated for one direction necessitated complete recalculation for another. Lieutenant Colonel Crichton Abrams, commanding the 37th Tank Battalion of the 4th Armored Division, received his orders at 7 p.m. on December 19th. His unit was tasked with covering 150 miles in 19 hours through a blizzard. "We drove with blackout lights through the night," he later recounted. Tank commanders stood in their turrets, frozen, guiding drivers who couldn't see the road. Men fell asleep standing up and had to be physically shaken awake. The logistical undertaking was immense. Each Sherman tank consumed 175 gallons of fuel for the journey. The division required 50,000 gallons simply to reach the starting line. Fuel trucks operated continuously, many sliding off icy roads into ditches. When trucks broke down, fuel was transferred manually using 5-gallon jerry cans. Master Sergeant Frank Carbone of the 4th Armored Maintenance Company worked for 72 consecutive hours. "We changed track blocks on tanks while they were still moving into position. Men's hands froze to the metal. We had instances where skin came off when they pulled their hands away, but nobody stopped. We all knew those paratroopers in Bastogne were counting on us." Back in Bastogne, the situation had deteriorated to a critical point. The defensive perimeter had contracted to less than 16 miles. German artillery had precisely targeted every strong point. Aid stations were overwhelmed with casualties. At 11:30 a.m. on December 22nd, 4 German officers approached the American lines under a white flag. They were met by soldiers from F Company, 327th Glider Infantry Regiment. The German delegation consisted of Major von Wagner of the 47th Panzer Corps, Lieutenant Helmut Henke of the Panzer Operations Section, and 2 enlisted men from the 9,000 and 1st Panzer Grenadier Regiment. Major von Wagner carried a typed ultimatum on 2 sheets, one in English, one in German. The English version had been typed on an English typewriter with German diacritical marks added by hand. Upon delivery to the command post, the message was immediately taken to General McAuliffe, who was taking a brief nap in the basement of the Belgian barracks, serving as headquarters. When Lieutenant Colonel Ned Moore roused him and stated, "The Germans have sent some people forward to accept our surrender," McAuliffe's immediate response was, "Nuts." His staff gathered as he read the full German message aloud. It detailed the hopeless predicament of the American forces, warning that German artillery was poised to annihilate the United States troops and that only surrender could save them from total obliteration. Colonel Moore inquired about the appropriate response. McAuliffe appeared genuinely perplexed. "Well, I don't know what to say." Lieutenant Colonel Harry Card interjected, "What you said first would be hard to beat, General." McAuliffe chuckled. "You mean nuts?" The room erupted in agreement. McAuliffe sat down and penned the reply that would become legendary to the German commander. "Nuts." The American commander. When Colonel Joseph Harper delivered the response to the awaiting German officers, they appeared bewildered. "Nuts? What does that mean?" Harper couldn't resist replying, "It means, go to hell, and I'll tell you something else. If you attack again, we'll kill every goddamn German that tries to break into this city." Major Wagner stiffened. "We will kill many Americans. This is war." "On your way, bud," Harper retorted. "And good luck to you." General Hasso von Manteuffel, commander of the 5th Panzer Army, later admitted his surprise that the ultimatum had even been dispatched. "The Panzer Lehr Division sent a parley to Bastogne without my authorization. The demand to surrender was refused, as was to be expected." The German reaction to McAuliffe's defiant response was swift and brutal. That evening, the Luftwaffe launched its first significant bombing raid on Bastogne. For the defenders in their foxholes, it was a grim preview of hell. Corporal Walter Gordon of Easy Company described the bombing. "The ground shook like an earthquake. Trees burst into flames. Shrapnel whizzed through the air like angry hornets. We pressed ourselves into the frozen earth and prayed." The temperature plummeted to near 10 degrees Fahrenheit. In the foxholes along the perimeter, men took turns sleeping to ward off freezing to death. They learned to urinate in empty ration cans rather than leave their positions. Exposure for even a few minutes could result in death from sniper fire or frostbite. Food had become a dire concern. The official ration was 1 K ration per day, approximately 2,800 calories, when men required 4,000 in the extreme cold. Soldiers learned to preserve the wax-coated cardboard from ration boxes. It burned long enough to heat a canteen of snow into drinkable water. Technical Sergeant Donald Malarkey discovered an innovative solution. "We found that the dead German horses, there were hundreds of them, were frozen solid, fresh meat. We'd hack off chunks with bayonets and cook them over fires made from broken ammunition boxes. It tasted terrible, but it sustained us." December 24th brought both hope and horror to Bastogne. The weather had finally begun to improve, raising expectations for aerial resupply. However, it also enabled the Luftwaffe to launch its most devastating assault. At 8:30 p.m. on Christmas Eve, German bombers appeared over Bastogne. One of their bombs scored a direct hit on the aid station where René Lamer was working. The building collapsed, entombing dozens of wounded soldiers and medical personnel. Corporal Kenneth Moore was outside when the bomb struck. "I heard the explosion and ran toward the building. Where the aid station had been was simply a mound of rubble. We could hear voices beneath, men crying for help, calling for their mothers. We dug with our bare hands through the night, extricating bodies. Miss Lemaire was deceased. She had remained with the wounded who could not be moved. 30 American soldiers perished in that single bombing raid, along with the Belgian nurse who had become a beacon of hope for the injured. Augusta Chaiwi, a Congolese-Belgian nurse, survived and continued to treat the wounded for 30 consecutive hours following the bombing. As Christmas Eve transitioned into Christmas Day, Patton's Third Army struggled through blizzard conditions. The offensive, which had commenced on December the 22nd, was behind schedule. The 4th Armored Division had advanced a mere 7 miles in 3 days. Patton, never one to adhere to conventional military strategies, had summoned his chaplain, Colonel James O'Neill, on December the 22nd. "Chaplain, I want you to publish a prayer for good weather. I'm tired of these soldiers having to fight mud and floods as well as Germans. See if you can't get God to work on our side." O'Neill expressed his doubts. "Sir, it's going to take a pretty thick rug for that kind of praying." "I don't care if it takes a flying carpet," Patton retorted. "I want you to get up a prayer for good weather." The prayer was printed on 250,000 cards and distributed to every soldier in the Third Army. "Almighty and most merciful Father, we humbly beseech Thee of Thy great goodness to restrain these immoderate rains with which we have had to contend. Grant us fair weather for battle." Whether through divine intervention or meteorological coincidence, December the 23rd dawned crystal clear. For the first time in a week, the sun broke through the clouds. The weather respite was miraculous. After 7 days of impenetrable fog and snow, visibility suddenly extended to 10 miles. The frigid air above Bastogne finally yielded, the temperature climbing past the freezing point for the first time in a full week. This meteorological shift held profound implications. most significantly permitting the Allied air forces to resume operations. At precisely 9:50 in the morning, the vanguard of airborne assistance, designated Pathfinder aircraft, commenced their arrival over the beleaguered town. They commenced by releasing colored smoke to precisely delineate the designated drop zones for incoming airborne troops and supplies. By 11:50 in the morning, the skies had transformed into a bustling aerial highway, thronged with C-47 transport planes. These formidable aircraft, numbering 241, maintained a flawless, disciplined formation as they navigated the airspace. Sergeant Jack Agnew, a member of the Pathfinder team, vividly recounted the scene. "We deployed purple smoke to clearly indicate the drop zone. Subsequently, we detected their approach, a low, resonant hum that escalated into an overwhelming roar. The sky became obscured by the sheer density of aircraft. It was, without question, the most breathtaking spectacle I had ever witnessed." Within Bastogne itself, the paratroopers erupted in jubilant cheers. Soldiers, who had endured days confined to their foxholes, emerged to wave their helmets, many with tears streaming unbidden down their faces. For 7 arduous days, they had faced their predicament in isolation. Now, the heavens had delivered a powerful infusion of aid. The initial parachutes, like blossoming flowers, appeared at 11:55 in the morning. Soon after, a cascade of vital provisions began to descend. Ammunition, essential medical supplies, sustenance, warming blankets, and crucially, artillery shells rained down from the sky. Of the 1,446 bundles airdropped, an astonishing 95% were successfully retrieved. Captain James Parker, associated with the 101st Airborne's G4 Logistics Division, meticulously oversaw the recovery operations. Soldiers, demonstrating immense bravery, ran through active artillery fire to secure these precious bundles. One such instance involved a private who sustained a shrapnel wound but, despite the injury, rose to his feet and dragged a vital bundle to safety, his face a mask of blood. However, the German forces had not remained passive. Anti-aircraft batteries, strategically positioned around Bastogne, unleashed their fury. The C-47 aircraft, compelled to maintain a steady, level trajectory at an altitude of 1,000 feet for accurate drops, became vulnerable targets, effectively sitting ducks. By the 26th of December, Allied aircraft had successfully delivered a staggering 1,020.7 tons of materiel via parachute and an additional 92.4 tons by glider. The most substantial aerial resupply effort occurred on December the 26th, when 289 planes undertook the perilous Boston Run. At 2:45 in the morning on Christmas Day, German artillery unleashed its most ferocious barrage to date upon Bastogne. For a relentless 2 hours, shells pounded the American positions. Then, at 5:30 in the morning, 18 Panzer Mark V tanks belonging to the 15th Panzer Grenadier Division, accompanied by infantry cloaked in white camouflage, launched an assault on the western perimeter. Leading this aggressive maneuver was Lieutenant Colonel Wolfgang Mahler. His orders, directly from General Kokot, were starkly clear. Bastogne must fall today. It is the Führer's Christmas wish. The formidable German tanks managed to breach the initial defensive line of foxholes held by Company A of the 327th Glider Infantry. Private First Class Kenneth Hendris occupied a position in the second defensive line. The ground itself vibrated with the deep rumble of the tank engines. In the dim dawn light, these armored behemoths appeared monstrous. American bazooka rounds proved ineffective, bouncing harmlessly off the thick German armor. However, the American forces had strategically positioned their tank destroyers with exceptional foresight. The M-18 Hellcats of the 75th Tank Destroyer Battalion had been artfully concealed within the ruins of bombed-out buildings. As the German tanks advanced past their hidden positions, the Hellcats opened fire from the flanks. Sergeant Bill Harper, commanding one of these agile tank destroyers, described their tactic. We allowed them to roll past, then struck them from the rear, where their armor was less formidable. My gunner, Corporal Johnson, performed magnificently. 5 shots, 3 confirmed kills. By 10 o'clock in the morning, all 18 German tanks were reduced to burning wrecks. Nearly 400 German soldiers lay dead in the snow-covered landscape. A captured German officer, speaking to his interrogators, admitted, "Your defense was absolutely magnificent. We understood after this morning's engagement that we could not possibly take Bastogne." General McAuliffe subsequently issued his Christmas message to the troops, detailing the German surrender demand, and his defiant response, adding, "We have completely halted everything that has been thrown at us from the north, east, south, and west." On December the 26th, at 400 hours, Lieutenant Charles Bulge, commanding the Sherman tank Cobra King of the 37th Tank Battalion, peered through his periscope towards the Belgian village of Asseninoa, a mere 4 miles from Bastogne. For the preceding 4 days, elements of the 4th Armored Division had been relentlessly battling their way through entrenched German positions, advancing only inch by bloody inch. The final push commenced at 2:20 in the afternoon. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams ordered his battalion forward, simultaneously requesting overwhelming artillery support. "I require every available gun," he urgently radioed. Within mere minutes, 2,340 artillery rounds began to rain down upon German positions in the vicinity of Asseninoa. Bogus vividly recalled the pivotal moment. "I could observe German troops fleeing their foxholes as our artillery barrage systematically swept through their lines. Once the bombardment ceased, Abrams gave the definitive order, 'Move out.' We surged forward at maximum speed, all weapons blazing." Private James Hendris, the bow gunner aboard Cobra King, described the successful penetration of enemy lines. "We tore through that town like a hot knife through butter. Germans were firing at us from windows, doorways, from every conceivable position. Our 75mm main gun was swiveling left and right, firing point-blank into buildings." At 4:50 in the afternoon, Cobra King crested a small elevation, and Bogus spotted friendly American soldiers ahead. These were engineers from the 326th Airborne Engineer Battalion, forming the outermost defensive perimeter of Bastogne. "Come on in," the engineers shouted. "You're the first tanks we've seen in 10 days. Bogus promptly radioed Abrams, reporting, "Contact with friendly forces established." The siege had been broken, but the cost had been immense. The 37th Tank Battalion sustained 5 fatalities, 22 wounded, and 5 missing during the breakthrough. The 53rd Armored Infantry Battalion endured 30 killed and 180 wounded. Nevertheless, the corridor, albeit only 400 yards in width, was now open. News of the successful breakthrough spread through Bastogne like wildfire. Soldiers who had been meticulously conserving every round of ammunition unleashed entire clips into the air in uninhibited celebration. Wounded soldiers in the field aid stations cheered lustily, their pain momentarily forgotten. General McAuliffe, maintaining his characteristic composure, simply remarked, "We are delighted to see you, boys." For the Germans, however, the psychological impact was devastating. General Major Kokot recorded in his personal diary, "The relief of Bastogne represents a profound disaster, not merely from a tactical standpoint, but morally as well. Our soldiers no longer harbor belief in our ability to achieve victory. They have witnessed the unyielding determination of the Americans, and it has utterly broken their spirit." Oberstleutnant Kaufmann of the Panzer Division offered a more blunt assessment. "We committed everything we possessed against Bastogne, our finest troops, our last reserves of tanks and ammunition, and for what they managed to hold, and when we demanded their surrender, they simply laughed at us. Nuts!" This single word inflicted more damage upon German morale than 1,000 bombs. The defenders, initially numbering approximately 18,000 men, faced relentless onslaughts. By December 26th, the 101st Airborne Division's casualties, spanning from December 19th to January 6th, tragically amounted to 341 killed, 1,691 wounded, and 516 missing. Combat Command B of the 10th Armored Division reported approximately 500 casualties. The 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion distinguished itself by destroying 108 German armored vehicles while sustaining the loss of only 17 Hellcats. German losses in the vicinity of Bastogne were catastrophic. The 26th Volksgrenadier Division sustained casualties exceeding 60%. Panzer Lehr lost 42 tanks. The 2nd Panzer Division, which had bypassed Bastogne with the objective of reaching the Moose River, ultimately ran out of fuel a mere 4 miles from its objective and was subsequently destroyed by the United States 2nd Armored Division. December 27th dawned with even clearer skies, ushering in the full, unbridled might of Allied air power. From December 23rd to the 27th, Allied aircraft executed over 34,000 sorties. The Luftwaffe, which had initiated the offensive with a strength of 2,000 aircraft, was reduced to fewer than 300 operational planes within a single week. Flight Lieutenant Pierre Klostermann of the Royal Air Force, piloting a Tempest fighter bomber over the battlefield, described the devastating effectiveness of their missions. It was what we termed tank plinking. The Germans possessed no air cover. We would descend from 8,000 feet, release our rockets at 2,000 feet, and then pull up. Below us, German vehicles ignited and burned for miles. The most devastating air raid occurred on December the 26th, when 294 RAF Lancaster bombers targeted German positions around St. V, unleashing 1,140 tons of bombs. Every road within a 3-kilometer radius became impassable. Unteroffizier Hans Barons of the 18th Volksgrenadier Division survived the harrowing raid. "The earth itself erupted," he recounted. "Buildings disintegrated. Men simply vanished, vaporized. When it finally ended, I emerged from my shelter to find a landscape resembling the moon." General McAuliffe specifically lauded the efforts of the 19th Tactical Air Command, stating, "Had it not been for your splendid cooperation, we should never have been able to hold out." Throughout the protracted siege, a remarkable transformation was occurring within the German ranks, a psychological shift that Allied intelligence would only fully comprehend in the aftermath of the war. German soldiers had entered the offensive fueled by pervasive propaganda, depicting Americans as weak, spoiled individuals who would capitulate at the slightest hint of serious combat. However, their experiences at Bastogne shattered these preconceived notions. Grenadier Wilhelm Hoffmann of the 26th Volksgrenadier wrote to his wife on December the 24th. The letter was later discovered on his person. He penned, "The Americans are not as we were led to believe. They fight like devils. Yesterday, I witnessed a solitary American machine gun crew holding off an entire company for 3 hours." Major Jan Krag of the Panzer Lehr Division, captured on December the 27th, offered a remarkable assessment during his interrogation. "You have achieved victory not through your superior numbers or weaponry, but because of your spirit. At Bastogne, we learned that American soldiers are true warriors." While the valiant defense of Bastogne captured widespread headlines, General Patton's relief operation represented an even more significant development, a veritable revolution in operational warfare. The logistical achievements remain nothing short of staggering. Within a mere 72 hours, Patton's Third Army successfully moved 250,000 men across over 100 miles of treacherous, icy roads, repositioned 133,000 vehicles without a single major traffic impediment, laid 20,000 meters of telephone wire, established 70 new ammunition supply points, created 40 fuel dumps stocked with 500,000 gallons of gasoline, set up 20 field hospitals, delivered 4,000 tons of ammunition, and distributed 62,000 maps. Colonel Oscar Coe, Patton's G2 intelligence officer, later wrote, "What Patton accomplished in those 3 days should have been physically impossible. We had calculated that a minimum of 6 days would be required solely to plan such a maneuver." The key to this extraordinary feat lay in meticulous preparation. Unbeknownst to many, Patton had been meticulously wargaming this exact scenario for 2 full weeks. While other generals dismissed the possibility of a German offensive, Patton had proactively instructed his staff to develop comprehensive contingency plans. The medical achievements during the siege also warrant exceptional recognition. Despite the confiscation of most medical supplies and personnel, on December the 19th, doctors and medics worked tirelessly, saving lives at remarkable rates. Major René Bowman, chief surgeon of the 101st Airborne, performed 167 operations in 10 days, many conducted without adequate anesthetic. "We operated by candlelight when the generators failed," she recalled. "We utilized cognac from Belgian homes when the morphine supply was exhausted." Technical Sergeant Eugene Rowe, attached to Easy Company, treated over 200 wounded men during the siege, frequently crawling through intense artillery bombardments to reach casualties. He never carried a weapon, only his vital medical supplies. The successful defense of Bastogne, coupled with Patton's daring relief operation, yielded consequences far exceeding a mere tactical victory. Hitler's ambitious offensive, designed to cleave the Allied armies and reclaim Antwerp, had been decisively thwarted. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, the overall German commander in the West, admitted in his post-war interrogation, "Bastogne was the graveyard of the Ardennes offensive. We required that crucial road junction by December 18th. When the Americans held out for a week and were then reinforced, we understood that the offensive had unequivocally failed." The Germans had committed their entire strategic reserve, comprising 25 divisions, to this offensive. Over the course of 6 weeks of intense fighting, they sustained between 81,000 and 98,000 casualties, lost over 600 tanks and assault guns, and 1,000 aircraft. These were losses that Germany could never hope to replace. American casualties, while severe, were approximately 75,000 killed, wounded, or missing, with 19,000 fatalities. Crucially, America possessed the capacity to replace these losses. By January 1945, fresh divisions were arriving from the United States at a rate of 1 per week. More significantly, the offensive had utterly exhausted Germany's final reserves. When the Soviets launched their winter offensive on January 12, 1945, Germany was devoid of strategic reserves to redeploy to the Eastern Front. The path to Berlin lay open. The Battle of Bastogne gave rise to legendary accounts that continue to resonate to this day. General McAuliffe's defiant "nuts" reply has become etched in American military folklore as the ultimate symbol of unwavering resolve. Patton's relief march is studied worldwide in military academies as a quintessential example of audacious operational planning. In December 1984, veterans from both sides convened in Bastogne to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the battle. Former adversaries met as friends. General McAuliffe, then 87 years old, delivered the keynote address. "We fought here not for conquest, but for freedom," he stated. "We fought not from hatred, but from duty, and when it was over, we helped rebuild what war had destroyed." Former Corporal Hans Detmer of the 26th Volks Grenadier Division, who returned for the anniversary, shared his reflections. "I arrived here as a conqueror in 1944. I return now as a friend. The Americans we fought demonstrated to us the true meaning of democracy, not weakness, but strength." Today, the Martyrs' Memorial stands proudly on a hill overlooking Bastogne, a star-shaped monument commemorating the 76,890 American soldiers who perished in the Battle of the Bulge. Every December 16th, precisely at 5:30 in the morning, the exact moment the German offensive commenced, bells ring out across Bastogne. In the town square rests the Sherman tank Barracuda from the 11th Armored Division, a tangible reminder of the battle. Children clamber over its armor, playing on the very machines that liberated their grandparents. Vincent Speranza, the paratrooper renowned for bringing beer to wounded soldiers, returned to Bastogne numerous times before his passing. The local brewery, in his honor, created a special airborne beer. During his final visit in 2019, at the age of 96, he raised a glass and toasted, "To the boys who didn't come home, to the people who never forgot, to freedom." The final statistical data from the Bastogne operation remains profoundly significant. The initial American garrison at Bastogne comprised 18,000 personnel, including 11,840 from the 101st Airborne. Combat Command B of the 10th Armored Division fielded 40 operational tanks. Total American casualties sustained at Bastogne were approximately 4,500. The German forces committed to the Bastogne engagement numbered between 25,000 and 30,000 initially, eventually escalating to approximately 55,000. German casualties in the Bastogne area exceeded 15,000, with over 100 tanks lost. Patton's relief force, numbering 250,000 men, executed a swift pivot northward, moving 133,000 vehicles over more than 100 miles of challenging winter terrain, achieving a breakthrough within 5 days. Supply operations were extensive. 1,200 tons delivered by air, 961 C-47 sorties flown, with 241 aircraft engaged on December the 23rd alone. An impressive 95% recovery rate was achieved for air-dropped supplies. Weather conditions were severe, with 168 consecutive hours below freezing, reaching a low of approximately 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Visibility between December 19th and 22nd was less than 100 yards, with clear weather commencing on December the 23rd. Winston Churchill, addressing Parliament in January 1945, declared, "This is undoubtedly the greatest American battle of the war, and will, I believe, be regarded as an ever-famous American victory." Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery admitted, "The Americans at Bastogne wrote one of the finest chapters in military history. Their stand will be remembered as long as men honor courage." Perhaps the most fitting tribute came from former Wehrmacht General Heinrich von Luttwitz, whose 47th Panzer Corps had encircled Bastogne. In 1954, while visiting the memorial, he offered a salute and stated, "They were magnificent enemies who became better friends. They fought not for conquest, but for principle. That is why they deserve to win." The German forces, who had initially mocked the Americans trapped in Bastogne, learned a profound lesson during those frigid December days of 1944. They discovered that free men fighting for each other possess a strength far exceeding any army driven by the pursuit of conquest. They learned that sheer determination carries greater weight than numerical superiority. And they understood that when democracy is pushed to the very brink, it retaliates with a formidable power that tyranny can never hope to match. The relief of Bastogne stands as undeniable proof that freedom, when truly imperiled, will invariably find its champions. In December 1944, those champions wore the distinctive screaming eagle of the 101st Airborne and the proud triangle insignia of Patton's Third Army. They were young men from Iowa farms and New York tenements, from Texas ranches and California factories. They were, in essence, America. On a tranquil hill just outside Bastogne lies a preserved foxhole, meticulously maintained exactly as it was in December 1944. A simple plaque beside it bears an inscription. These are the words spoken by a young paratrooper whose name has been lost to the annals of history, but whose indomitable spirit endures eternally. "They've got us surrounded, the poor bastards." That magnificent defiance, that absolute refusal to concede defeat even when succumbing seemed an inescapable certainty. That was the very spirit of Bastogne. It was the spirit that held the line unyieldingly against the encroaching tyranny. It was the spirit that propelled Patton's tanks roaring triumphantly through the snow. And when the critical moment arrived, when the very future of freedom hung precariously in the balance, they responded with a single word destined to echo through eternity: nuts. The German derision died in the snow surrounding Bastogne, buried beneath the thunderous advance of Patton's tanks and the unconquerable spirit of besieged paratroopers who simply refused to surrender. In its place, respect blossomed, evolving into admiration and ultimately enduring friendship. The fortress of democracy had held its ground. The arsenal of freedom had triumphed, and in that monumental victory, the future of the free world was irrevocably secured.